Most people think abductions only happen in dark alleys or in horror movies. But what if I told you the scariest cases often start in the most ordinary places? A quiet bar, a gas station, a Walmart aisle. That's not coincidence, that's strategy. There's a dark pattern behind these attempts, and it's much closer than you think. Ignoring the signs can be a deadly mistake. And the craziest part? None of these attackers used force at first. They used manipulation, tempting offers, and the silence of the night. These victims escaped by seconds. You're about to understand how, why, and what changed their lives forever. And in the end, you'll know exactly what to do so you're not next. Creepy encounter at the dive bar. Cadence was used to the eerie stillness of late nights at the dive bar where she worked. The dim yellow lights cast long shadows on cracked walls, and the hum of the old freezer sounded like whispers from the dark. That's when he walked in, well-dressed, calm, eyes empty, too polite, too polished, like he was playing a role. That's when the first chill crawled down her spine, quiet but unmistakably laced with terror. She stuck to the usual script, asked what he wanted to drink, made small talk, kept it light, but he answered everything too deliberately, never breaking eye contact. Cadence knew something was off. It was like the bar had been swallowed by an invisible fog of suspense. The fear didn't scream. It lingered, like poison in the air. He left just as quietly as he came. For a week, everything went back to normal, or so it seemed. But Cadence couldn't shake his stare from her mind, or the way he seemed to know more about her than she'd told him. Then, one quieter night he returned, but this time he wasn't alone. A woman, tall, pale, and expressionless, stood at his side, and when her eyes met Cadence's, her blood went cold. The woman smiled, not with her mouth, but with her eyes, and offered Cadence a job, $10,000 for a weekend house-sitting gig. At first glance, it sounded like a miracle. But the more they talked, the more it felt like a trap. Too much money, too little context. Fear trickled in through the cracks. This wasn't an offer, it was bait. Cadence declined, keeping her voice calm, though her instincts screamed otherwise. The man didn't argue. He just watched her, like he already knew she'd say no, and the woman's eyes turned cold. Without another word, they left. But the night didn't feel safe anymore. Minutes later, a black van pulled up across the street. Its windows were pitch black, like their intentions. Half an hour passed. Then the alarm blared. Someone was trying to break in through the back door. Cadence ducked behind the bar, trembling, and called her boss. Luckily, he lived just blocks away. By the time he arrived, the intruders were gone, but the terror remained. Something dark had crept into that bar, and it wasn't finished yet. They checked the security footage the next day, and what they saw froze their blood. Two masked men approached the back door, while a third figure waited by the van. Every step was deliberate, every move rehearsed. This wasn't random. It was a carefully planned abduction attempt, real-life horror. With no script, no safety net, only close calls. Cadence never looked at Too Good to Be True offers the same way again. Even now, with reinforced locks and new security cameras, the feeling lingers. At 2:30 a.m., the bar still feels haunted, not by ghosts, but by something worse. And while she survived that night, she wasn't the only one who was targeted that week. Ambush at the gas station. It was around 2:30 in the morning when Marcus, a night shift clerk, saw a car slowly pull up to the pumps. The air was thick with silence, just the creak of metal signs and the crunch of tires on cold pavement. A man stepped out, acting unsure, said his car was acting up, asked Marcus to come take a look. But something about him felt off. That first wave of fear came quietly, then hit hard. Marcus had dealt with strange customers before, but this one, he was too calm, too controlled. He spoke slowly, gently urging Marcus to step out of the safety of the booth. But the booth had cameras and a panic button. The terror crept in beneath Marcus's skin. His instincts were screaming, and then he saw it. There was a second car parked awkwardly nearby, lights off. Behind it, a crouching figure barely visible in the shadows. That was all Marcus needed to see. This wasn't about car trouble. It was an ambush. Everything about this reeked of suspense, calculated, quiet, and dangerous. He wasn't being asked for help. He was being hunted. In one sharp movement, Marcus slammed the emergency button beneath the counter. The man paused for a second, just one, then turned and walked away. No running, no threats, just gone. Disappeared into the darkness like he'd never been there. But the fear stayed behind, and the silence felt louder than ever before. Police arrived minutes later, but the suspects had already vanished. The second car had been stolen, and its plates traced back over 100 miles. This wasn't spur of the moment. This was a hunt. Organized, methodical. Someone had followed Marcus, watched, chosen him. That's where the terror lies, in knowing you were the target, and you didn't even realize it until the last second. Footprints around the gas pumps proved they'd been there before the man even walked in. They'd mapped the scene, picked blind spots, planned exit routes. Marcus couldn't shake the thought. How long had they been watching him? And worse, why him? The suspense now lived in every shift he worked, every sound behind him, every parked car with its lights off. He switched to daytime hours soon after. It was the only way to sleep without waking up in cold sweats. But even now, the gas station hasn't changed. Same lights, same chill, same haunting silence. For Marcus, every beep at the register feels like the start of something dark, like the horror might return at any moment. And what scared him most? Nothing was solved. No arrests, no solid leads, just another shadow swallowed by the night. But this wasn't an isolated case. Because just across town, in a brightly lit retail store, another night worker found herself face to face with a danger that smiled in her direction. Lure in a Walmart aisle. Emily's shift at Walmart had been uneventful, until it wasn't. As she stacked shelves in a half-lit aisle, she noticed a man lingering. He wasn't shopping. He wasn't holding anything, just watching. She brushed it off at first. But as he reappeared in aisle after aisle, always near but never close, the suspense grew. And so did the fear. She changed sections. He followed, not with footsteps, but with presence, like a shadow that knew how to stay just out of reach. Her chest tightened. Something wasn't right. Then a woman approached her, friendly face, calm voice. "You're being watched," she whispered. "They're filming you." Emily froze. And just like that, the terror became real. The woman took her arm, saying she'd help her get out safely, said she knew what was happening. But instead of leading her to security, she pulled her toward a side exit, one with no cameras. That's when Emily's fear turned to full-blown panic. She tried to resist, but the woman's grip was strong, and her face emotionless. Emily stumbled, pretending to fall, and screamed with every ounce of strength she had. Her voice echoed down the empty aisle. A stockroom worker ran out, and in the confusion, the woman let go and bolted. Just like that. Gone. But Emily knew that woman wasn't trying to save her. She was part of it. Security footage confirmed the worst. The man and woman had entered separately, but stayed near Emily the entire time. Never shopping. Never interacting with others, just circling her like sharks. Even more chilling, The woman had spoken Emily's name, but Emily wasn't wearing a name tag. How did she know? Investigators believe they were receiving instructions, possibly from someone outside, someone watching, someone who had planned this in advance. The terror wasn't just in the moment. It was in the fact that they knew who she was, where she'd be, what she looked like. This wasn't random. This was hunting. Emily was moved off night shifts for her safety, but everything changed. Every aisle became a threat. Every customer, a question mark. The suspense stuck to her like a shadow. Her survival wasn't luck, it was instinct. But how many don't get that chance? And the most disturbing discovery? All 3 incidents happened within the same 72-hour window, all around 2:30 a.m., all with similar tactics: isolation, manipulation, psychological bait. Coincidence? Or a coordinated pattern? The numbers tell a chilling story. Data-driven insights. $10,000 for a weekend gig. That's what Cadence was offered. Way too much, with no details. That's not generosity. That's a lure. Predators know what they're doing. They use temptation to lower defenses. And behind that money was a plan soaked in fear, suspense, and a quiet kind of terror that waits for the perfect moment to strike. 3 attackers at the bar, 2 masked figures, 1 at the getaway van. That's not random. That's structure. It shows a level of planning meant to scare you, and it works. Because once you realize it was all choreographed, the fear takes deeper root. You start wondering how many rehearsals came before the attempt. A stolen car drove over 100 miles before showing up at Marcus's gas station. Why? Because you were never safe. You were being watched. Maybe days before. The horror in that is subtle but devastating. When you finally feel it, it's already too late. That's the scariest part. The terror was always there. All 3 cases happened around 2:30 a.m. It's not just late. It's perfect. The world's asleep, streets are dead, and help is far away. That time frame isn't a coincidence. It's a hunting window. The suspense in that moment is different. It's not just darkness, it's isolation, vulnerability, silence before the scream. Each of these stats on their own seems minor, but together, they paint a portrait of horror, a blueprint, one built on silence, shadows, and surgical precision. And the ones behind it? They don't need to rush. They've already done the math. Emily's escape came down to a scream, 1 second, 1 sound. That's what saved her. Think about that. 1 less second and she could have vanished. How many others didn't make it to that scream? The fear grows not in the moment, but in the aftermath. The most terrifying part? We don't know how many others are out there. Not just survivors, but victims no one even knows about. These cases broke the surface, but below, there's an entire network, maybe, still in the shadows, watching, waiting, choosing. These stories aren't just horror tales. They're warnings. Now that you've seen how terror can wear a polite smile or hide behind a friendly favor, ask yourself, would you have noticed the signs? How many times have you ignored that gut feeling, thinking it was nothing? How close have you been without realizing? This fear? It's real, and it walks among us every night. So pay attention, because your instinct might be the only thing keeping you safe. Will you keep telling yourself, it could never happen to me? Or are you finally ready to see what's been hiding in plain sight? Drop a comment below if you've ever felt something was off, even if you couldn't explain it. Let's talk. Let's protect each other. And if this video opened your eyes, if it made your heart race or taught you something new, subscribe and hit the bell, because the scariest stories are the ones we almost never hear in time.